Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. This video is a continuation of my last presentation about the living universe and specifically the meaning of the words cosmos and logos. There is a link to my previous presentation. If you are watching this on the video hosting platform, there will be a link to today's presentation, to the text that I have here in front of me. There will be a link to my website from where you can find the video, and then below the video the text of the presentation. So today's video will introduce concepts such as mysticism, or the mystical facet of the human experience. I understand these are heavily loaded terms and it can be tricky to overcome some preconceived notions. Still, I ask that you keep an open mind as we approach this subject with a clear philosophical intent. Suffice to say here at the outset that mysticism and related concepts are not the same as occult rituals and beliefs in the supernatural, superstitions, or such mumbo-jumbo. As with the previous presentation, I will start with some definitions. It is important to explain how I will be using certain terms so that we are all on the same page. Then I will gradually substantiate the claim that humans have a mystical side that they can develop, effectively broadening their perspective about the oneness of the living universe, as I elaborated in the previous presentation. So you can see here the contents of today's talk. So we have the definitions first, then four facets of what is a human, the mystical facet in practice, religiosity and mysticism, moderation through knowledge, hubris, mythology and ordinary experiences, myth as technology, and finally, who should encode and decode myths. So these are the topics that I will address in today's presentation. So with those out of the way, let's start with the definitions. And the first word is mystery, which in Greek is mysterio. It is a noun derived from a word that practically means initiation to a given field of knowledge or tradition. Other meanings of mystery include that which is secret or obscure. Secrecy and obscurity are interesting occurrences in this context, because if you think about it, they are the inverse of knowledge, of this initiation into some tradition of or school of thought. Because when you do not understand something, when you lack the requisite analytical framework, the subject appears alien to you, even though it is not inherently unintelligible. It is not inherently impossible to know about it. For example, when an average computer user is presented with the source code of a program, they feel it is all mystery to them because they lack the requisite training. They don't know how to read the code. Thus, the mysteries presuppose knowledge, and the lack of such knowledge gives the impression of obscurity. So the mystic, then, the mystis in Greek, is the person who has been initiated in a given field of knowledge or tradition, who holds that knowledge and continues the tradition. Do not conflate mystic with mystique, so with Q-U-E as an ending. The latter describes a situation characterized by mystery. So mystery in the sense that I have already explained. Then we have the word myth, which is that which is communicated or taught. It is the narrative. A myth also describes a tale or invented story whose primary function is to teach some deeper meaning and secondarily to entertain the audience. Ataraxia is the word exists in English and it is pronounced that way in Greek as well. A state of non-disturbance or else tranquility. This relates to one's overall disposition where they have established inner harmony and are no longer compelled to act on the basis of instincts or emotions. In a sense, ataraxia is freedom of the highest order, freedom from control. Then we have the word hubris, which in Greek is pronounced as hubris. And this is the brand of cockiness that does not recognize the boundaries within which human experience must unfold. And I will explain this in more concrete terms further below. And finally, we have psychagogia, and this literally means entertainment. It is the Greek word for entertainment. We use it in everyday parlance. However, we have to break it down to its constituents to appreciate its significance. We have the term psyche, so the first component is psyche, which refers to the soul or the vital force or inner world of a person, and this is what psychology studies. And the other word is agogi, which in English may also be pronounced as agogi, which refers to education, upbringing, or more generally guidance. For example, in English we have the word pedagogy from Greek pedagogia, which is the education of people and specifically young people, the definition of the word, but of people in general. In this sense, then, entertainment is not simply about passing our time and casually having fun. Rather, it entails the normative view that culture ought to teach us or to inspire us in a way that we should be the best version of ourselves. Psychagogia, then, must prepare people to aspire to their highest. Education is used to communicate profound lessons, to initiate people in some tradition or school of thought. This is best done in a way that is fun and enjoyable, of course, because keeping it interesting helps with the communicative aspect, with what you are trying to say. So we can see here the connection between the profound meaning of psychagogia and the ordinary sense of entertainment. So they are not necessarily that different. Moving on to the next section, which is about the 4 facets of a human being. And let's write it here also in the title so it looks better. And let us analyze the general features of a human. By analyze, and this is something I'd also discussed in the previous video, the word analyze means to mentally keep things separate, to construct mental representations of patterns that exist in the world and treat them as if they had a standalone presence. But they are analytical constructs, meaning that they don't actually have a standalone presence. So in reality, those magnitudes that I will be analyzing, that I will be treating as if they have a standalone presence, are a part of the same system. They cannot exist without the others. So we will see this concretely. We have In the human experience, we can initially see that there are three facets to it. There are three broad ways in which we can understand the human being: the body, the emotions, and the mind. The exact words do not really matter. We could use other terms for those, like psyche or whatever, but what matters is the substance here. So all humans have those. All humans have a body, emotions, and mind. Of the three, the body is the most developed. It consists of all the instincts and the mechanisms, the near mechanistic mechanisms that regulate one's presence. For example, a human knows how to breathe without further instruction. From the day you are born, you know how to breathe, for example. Then come the emotions. These are like the body in the sense that they are well developed, though they can be trained to be in concert with rational action. And rational action, of course, we refer to the third facet, which is the mind. And this describes the faculties we possess for computation, pattern matching, reasoning, and the like. All three influence each other. A healthy body maintains a balance that produces pleasant emotions, or at least does not generate feelings that are self-destructive. This, in turn, helps the mind stay focused on thinking things through. And conversely, an unhealthy body engenders emotions that can hurt us, and by extension, the mind is no longer capable of focusing on its tasks. It is no longer capable of doing what it does best. The relationship between those three facets is circular. If the mind is obsessed with something, for example, something that is unattainable, it will eventually contribute to feelings of failure, worthlessness, disappointment, because you are searching for something that you can never get, so you rationalize that as you not being good enough for it. So you are worthless, you get disappointed, and so on. And those feelings of worthlessness will contribute to processes in the body that adapt various subsystems of the organism to the new equilibrium of overall negativity. So the hormones and all that, but I don't want to talk in scientific terms because that's not the point. We want to get a general idea here and not focus on technicalities. We can see this at play with diseases such as depression, which is typically considered a mental condition, though it necessarily has to influence all three facets as they do not have a standalone presence. So analytically, we may say that it is a mental condition, but in practice, it is everything. It affects the totality of the human organism. So this circularity is noticeable even through less major issues, so not just depression, even through minor injuries, as the person tends to obsess over the wound and can be a bit paranoid about it. Of course, to an extreme, but you know what I mean. The mind no longer performs optimally. The emotions involve frustration and the general pessimistic outlook, while the body obviously suffers from the immediate injury. Same principle for one's diet, everyday routines, and levels of activity. The circularity is always there. Notice how the heading of this section references 4 facets, yet I have only described 3 of them. Which is the 4th one? It is the mystical side, which can be described as potentially superordinate to the previous three, though again, they are all part of the same system. So this is again an analytical construction. The mystical involves training, the accumulation of knowledge, and the ability to use the insights derived therefrom to establish harmony between the facets of the human experience. Next page, on the same topic. The mystical is associated with notions of enlightenment because one, it initially is the least developed of a human's facets. Of course, it is the least developed. We don't start out with knowledge of things. We start out with the minimal necessary to keep the body working. And two, it can be applied to direct the other three facets. So it can be thought of as superordinate to the other three facets. Remember what we said about terms such as mystery. They pertain to the introduction to a given field of knowledge or tradition. Without this initiation, the mystical facet is obscure and would appear as unapproachable or mysterious, as we say, in the sense of being weird or alien to us. We can get glimpses of the mystical facet of the human experience in action by observing differences in behavior between kids and adults. Both groups share the same dispositions and faculties, though the latter, the adults, is more likely to have accumulated at least some knowledge which is applied in the given situation to make the correct or a more correct judgment call. This is the hint we need, as it tells us that more and better training, the appropriate initiation, in other words, can bring us closer to this ideal of having the right perspective and making the correct choices because of it. So let's move to the next section, the mystical facet in practice. Consider what I covered in my previous video about cosmos, logos, and the living universe. I basically claimed that the universe has the same features of ratio, rate, reason, language, and order that we have. The mystical realization, then, is that humans are not the epicenter of the world, neither individually nor collectively. Rather, they are parts of the greater whole, just as everything else, from particles to galaxies and anything in between or beyond those extremes. Why is this a mystical realization, you may wonder? Because it involves deep knowledge of the world. Remember the meaning of mystery as initiation. This knowledge is not something we get without considerable effort. We have to earn it. We, of course, have the potential for it. We start out with this potential, but we have to develop it. It is not a given. It is not taken for granted. Compare that to the instinct of self-preservation. It is there from day one and is already well developed. Without the mystical facet, our body governs our worldview as it conditions us to a state of egocentrism. We start from the survival instinct, and so we treat everything in terms of how it relates to us. Everything is a means to the end of surviving. As we learn about ourselves, which involves learning about the others, given that no human has a standalone presence, we begin to sense how egocentrism is misleading. We are not alone in this world. As we develop the mystical facet, we essentially discover the others. These go hand in hand, these come together, which provides us with a new perspective on selfhood. Instead of thinking of ourselves as the epicenter, we understand that it is yet another node in a distributed system of coexisting forms of being. The sense of a center with everything revolving around it is an illusion. Yes, that illusion does help us live, but it cannot be left in charge of things. It has to be controlled by a more refined instrument, so to speak. So we move from the subjective experience, where we think of everything as revolving around ourselves, to the intersubjective, to the relationship between ourselves and the others. The others are not just humans, but the others in the sense of the other beings, the other forms of life, the world at large. So our relation with the greater whole, our place in it. Developing the mystical facet has the effect of reducing the overall influence of the other facets on the human's conduct. The mystic, which is the person who is involved in mysticism, who has been initiated to the mysteries, the profound knowledge, as we said, is no longer compelled to act on instinct or emotion. The mystic has perspective of the bigger picture, which necessarily brings about harmony. And we will discuss this further. So to put it in practical terms, because so far we have been talking about the mystical side in abstract. So the mystic, for example, let's consider an example. The mystic does not need validation from others, such as in the form of fame or glory, or if you want, the number of followers on social media and the amount of likes for every post or whatnot. Because the mystic understands these are trivial concerns in the grand scheme of things. The mystic cannot be disturbed by the lack of such validation. They are indifferent towards it because they know it is inconsequential. Consider how egoist many behavioral patterns of humans are, such as the all too common altercations that start with something like this, and I'm sure you are aware of this. Someone says to the other person, "Move," and the other person replied, "No, you move." What did you say? Move. Do you know who I am? You get the idea how these kind of fights start out. So you need to tell the other person how important you are and why you are special or whatnot. So you won't make a concession. The same mechanics of this kind of egoism are at work when humans try to outcompete each other over issues such as who has the most expensive car, who can get the most followers on social media, as I already said, whose career is the most successful, whose kids are the best performers at school, and so on. The mystic knows that these are preoccupations which keep us trapped in a cycle where the body, the emotions, and the mind influence each other without direction, without an overarching structure. There is no sense of stability, of couching those three facets in terms of a superordinate one which holds them in check and keeps them functioning in concert. In this regard, the mystic is not attached to their self and to everything that appears as an extension of selfhood. They are not egocentric. For example, they are not concerned whether their project is perceived as successful or not. So the project is an extension of self, something I do and something I want to identify with. This is how we tend to think of things. So the mystic is not associated with their works. They are not attached to their works. It is not their selfhood made manifest, so to speak. As I said, they are not attached. So they are not concerned with whether the project is successful or not. Because the mystic, by definition, is the one who is committed to the given field of knowledge. So they are in a quest for knowledge. And this appears outwardly as aloofness from the fray, as if they are there, so to speak, without being there, because they are not committed, so they don't seem to attach value to the world around them, to what they do, and to their self in that regard as well. So this sort of apparent aloofness, this indifference, comes from a position of knowledge. It is not the same as a casual claim that I don't care. Rather, it involves profound realization of the factors at play. It is about being able to look at the bigger picture and understand how things relate to each other, which necessarily includes the view of the person's role in the universe, the living universe, as I said before. This is the ataraxia, the non-disturbance, the tranquility that I mentioned earlier. And one can reach that state of ataraxia, or at least work towards it, through training. To outsiders, the person who is at that stage or approximating it, that stage of ataraxia, will seem utterly strange, obscure, alien. It is the dual meaning of mystery, as we have already discussed. Next section, religiosity and mysticism. At this point, it is important to stress that mysticism is not about transcending the human experience as a human. That involves the impossibility of trying to overcome the body while being embodied, to escape from emotions and sense impressions while having faculties of emotion and sense impression, to accumulate and use knowledge with the means one has at their disposal while wanting to go beyond those means. Mysticism then is not about becoming a non-human human, but rather aspiring to our highest, to be the most refined version of what humanity has to offer. This is where religion and religiosity come into the picture. We can think of the religious experience in two broad terms based on historical evidence. The one is religion without mystical underpinnings. This is the same sort of egoism I mentioned earlier, where humans find reasons to fight each other. Religion, in this specific sense, is weaponized in the service of ulterior goals. Hence, wars over religion, proselytism through force, through fire and steel, as we say, witch hunts, inquisitions, intolerance of other beliefs, and the like. And the other broad conception of religion is as a conduit to mystery. Mystery, again, in the sense we are talking about here. This is the understanding of religiosity as a way to enrich the human experience. It can help people have a sense of the bigger picture and learn how they are part of a greater whole. In this regard, religion is not about dividing people into groups or clans, as it were, but showing them that despite superficial differences, there is something which is common in the multitude, something we can all understand. When we are on the path of knowledge, we no longer see religion as an obstacle to enlightenment. Instead, we treat it as yet another innovation of humanity, whose purpose is to store and disseminate knowledge in a form that is understandable even by those who do not have the time for intensive training, so even by those who are not mystics. To the mystic, religion is not about who is right and who is wrong, but rather it presents a corpus of work that can facilitate the development of the mystical facet of the human being. This is not about following religious practices to the letter, such as the ceremonies or the prayers. There is a deeper understanding of what those signify, what their real purpose is, which is not about adherence to themselves. They are not the goal. Religion is a problem only when it is devoid of knowledge, when it becomes a dogma that one must follow to the letter without appreciation of its underlying values or hidden meanings. Though this is true not just for religion, but since I am talking about it here, it applies to everything humans may associate themselves with. Think, for example, about football fans and hooliganism. So they associate with a given team and they go to great extremes of violence and whatnot, which are utterly pointless. Again, one must have a sense of perspective. So the next question, the next section rather. Moderation through knowledge. Since we cannot become non-human humans, there is this impossibility already described, mysticism is all about elevating the human experience to its highest potential. We cannot do that by trying to become purely rational or fully emotional or only bodily, whatever that would be. Remember that those are part of the same system. They are analytical constructs. They don't have a standalone presence. One of those facets cannot exist without the others. They are all part of the same system. So instead of prioritizing one, instead of trying to amplify one at the expense of others, we must work towards harmony between them, where none overpowers the other two. And this is what the mystical facet does, which is the fourth component that binds the other three in harmony. To this end, we have some profound insights that come to us from the ancient Greek religion, specifically the temple of Apollo in Delphi. Delphi is an area in a place in Greece. And from that tradition, we get three maxims that are of particular interest. The first maxim is know yourself, γνώθη σε αυτόν. The second maxim is to do nothing in excess, μηδέν άγαν. And the third one is ensure, if you ensure, ruin will come. Ensure ruin nears is the literal translation. Engia paradata is in Greek. You can loosely translate this as certainty brings ruin, or certainty guarantees that ruin will come. So something like that. But the concise wording is like this. Ensure thus ruin will near. So these are related to the god Apollo, who symbolizes harmony. Apollo is the god of harmony. And this kind of symbolism is no coincidence, because it captures an archetype, a view of the world that we keep encountering regardless of the particularities of the case. So those three maxims, those three Delphic maxims, must be read together in light of how we understand the cosmos. To know yourself, you have to learn about the whole, because you do not have a standalone presence. There is no such thing as, say, a decontextualized conscience that can somehow understand itself in a vacuum. There is the fully fledged humankind, a system of systems in its own right, which coexists with everything in its immediate environment and the super systems, so the systems of systems that envelop this environment and by extension the humans inside of it and everything else. One can only begin to gain knowledge of their self by finding the others. The others, again, in the general sense, not the other humans, the other forms of life. This is a lifelong commitment to selfhood as non-self-centeredness. One cannot be certain of their findings, though, as that is a form of recklessness. It is an implicit claim of knowing about the whole, of knowing about everything through partial information. So unflinching certainty undoes what one is trying to achieve. Because you will take something you know right now for granted, and then you will be maintaining a closed mind about future knowledge. So you are negatively predisposed towards future knowledge. So this brings ruin by extension. As for doing nothing in excess, this is what we already found by examining the facets of a human, where we realized that we cannot amplify one over the others. There has to be a balance, a virtuous midpoint. As each person is different, the balance is not the same for everyone. There is no one size fits all, if you will. Instead, each person has to learn about who they are, in the sense I already explained, in order to be in a position of finding their own midpoint. Furthermore, we can discern how moderation, in its uncertainty about the absolutes, relates to ataraxia, to this sense of non-disturbance, of tranquility. If you cling on to something, such as social validation, then you are exaggerating its significance in the grand scheme of things. You are doing things in excess, as you are attaching value to them when they do not deserve it. So, next section, hubris, mythology, and ordinary experiences. The word hubris describes the deviation, hubris in Greek as we said, describes the deviation from what ought to be a moderate disposition. In a sense, to commit hubris is to lack harmony, to not understand the archetype symbolized by Apollo. In Greek mythology, there are lots of stories about humans who overestimated their abilities and who had to suffer the consequences of their lack of judgment, of their insolence. One such example, which I will also reference again further into this presentation, is Odysseus, also known as Ulysses, the protagonist of Homer's Odyssey, who was traveling back home after the Trojan War and was at some point captured by a monster known as a Cyclops. Odysseus managed to escape from the Cyclops, but instead of heading home, he chose to brag about his achievement and permanently injure the Cyclops. This brought about the wrath of the Cyclops' father, the god Poseidon, who is the god of the seas, and that forced Odysseus to travel for 10 years instead of what should have been a short trip. The details do not matter right now. The point is that the protagonist of the story did not recognize the boundaries of his existence and thus had to suffer from his lack of foresight or perspective. We should not think of hubris as punishment from the gods. This is just a metaphor, a story that is easy to convey. We must instead focus on the meaning of a balanced attitude and of avoiding excesses. Think about everyday experiences. Too little food deprives you of the energy you need to be effective in whatever it is you are doing. Too much food makes you sick. Both of those extremes are a form of hubris. You don't understand what the boundaries are. So you need to eat the right amount of food and the right kind of food by extension. And this is where the moderation is. Same principle for everything we do. Let's say you are out hiking. You must know what your abilities are, but also what the requirements of the terrain are, as well as what the weather demands, what are the requirements of the prevailing conditions in general. Otherwise, you cannot know what the right balance is because you are ignoring the constitution of the case. This is something I talked about in my previous video. But generally, you don't recognize how things stand. So if you are super confident in your abilities without accounting for the prevailing conditions, if you are certain, even though you do not really know how things stand, that will lead to your ruin, such as in the form of a severe injury. We see then that hubris is not about some abstract theological considerations or even an artistic device to forward a narrative, such as in the case of the Odyssey. It is directly applicable to our quotidian life, to our day-to-day experience, which can only make us wonder about the utility of myths as a medium and of mythology as a source of knowledge, which brings us to the section about myth as technology. In our age, the word myth is equivalent to a fabricated story or more broadly, a falsehood. For example, we hear about attempts at myth busting, which are supposed to shed light on how things actually are. In other words, myths and mythology are largely considered undesirable. As with all great lies, this view is based on a kernel of truth. Yes, myths are fabricated stories. Of course they are. They do not necessarily correspond to some historical fact, and they do not have to take place in an actual country or whatnot. But they are not lies either, because their verity is not about what they say in literal terms, but what they mean beyond the superficialities of appearance, of the narrative. You must understand that myths are a form of ancient technology, an invention that has helped humanity flourish. Myths have mnemonic value. They are easy to remember. This makes them suitable for even the most low-tech civilizations to store knowledge in a highly resilient and interoperable format, and also to disseminate it effectively. A myth can contain a rich corpus of work whose meanings are condensed in schematic representations. Put differently, a myth is like a compressed file that we need to unpack with the right tools in order to decipher the knowledge contained within. Consider again the scene of the Odyssey I mentioned in the previous section. Our protagonist, Odysseus or Ulysses, is captured by a Cyclops. The Cyclops is described as a giant who towers over ordinary humans. The Cyclops possesses a single eye on its forehead. This kind of description serves as a mnemonic device, a symbol we can always remember and always recall, even as young kids, or especially as young kids because of the impression it leaves on us. The Cyclops holds Odysseus and his companions captive inside its cave. It is preparing to make a lunch out of them. The protagonist cannot challenge the beast to a one-on-one combat. That would be folly and would result in certain death. Instead, Odysseus must use his mind to outsmart the formidable foe. The details of the story, again, do not matter to us right now. What we learn just from this instance here is that when faced with seemingly impossible odds, we should not panic or give up, but instead think carefully about a strategy that will lead us out of the allegorical cave. How many times do we need this attitude in life? In times of desperation, in times of crisis? Is it not true that calmness and clarity of mind can help us circumvent obstacles that would otherwise be impossible to overcome? So instead of being superficial and making fun of people for believing that a Cyclops is real, which is silly, we must keep an open mind and understand what the myth is trying to teach us. The best myths do not concern themselves with mundane details. Instead, they codify knowledge of patterns that we encounter over and over again, regardless of age and culture. Continuing with this theme of myth as technology, we must draw a distinction, a fine, nuanced distinction between ancient and outdated. Myths are a primeval invention, they are very old, but they remain as relevant as ever, including through art and religiosity. Even in this age of advanced technology, we employ mythological practices as part of our culture. Maybe we don't describe them in those terms, but the essence is there. Think, for example, how important fiction is in our life, or metaphors, if you want, more generally. It is part of how we socialize, communicate ideas, and support our lifelong education. Take Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings as a case in point. Superficially, we have an adventure with medieval weaponry and magic that involves humans, orcs, dragons, and other creatures. It is fun to read the books or watch the movies. Though the narrative is not simply about what happens with the Ring of Power in some fantasy land, as it holds teachings which are directly applicable to our world. Is it not true that a person who wields too much power can be dangerous? And is that not why we want, at least in principle, maybe we don't achieve it, but at least in principle we pay lip service to this notion. We want to have forms of governance that distribute competencies across more than one or a few people. Every myth has a lot to teach, so I am in no way exhausting the topic with this example. That would be ridiculous, of course. The point is that Tolkien, in this case here, uses the metaphor of a magic ring to describe, among others, the complexity of factors that inform hierarchical forms of organization. Just how Plato, or Platon in Greek, used the myth of another magic ring, the ring of Gyges, and I will talk about this in a future episode, to elaborate on matters of morality and justice. Next and final question, section. Again, I confused section with question, so sorry about that. Who should encode and decode myths? I noted that myths are like compressed files that we need to unpack with the right tools. If we do not do this right, we will reach false conclusions, just like how we get a garbled output on the computer when we do not decode a file properly. Myths have a discursive aspect to them. They are narratives, meaning that the function of the decoder has to be performed by a person who has knowledge of the subject matter. Same principle for the creation of myths. Anyone can come up with an imaginary story, but only those who already have insight can encode profound meanings in metaphors or allegories. Thus, myths are not inherently didactic qua myths. They are not didactic in themselves. They can be didactic if they embed knowledge, if they contribute to psychagogia, as I mentioned earlier, this guidance of the soul, as we said, which involves entertainment but is not limited to entertainment. And so this psychagogia, they have to contribute to it. And myths are at their best when the meaning they communicate helps us aspire to our highest. Which means that the right person to encode and decode myths is the one who is on the path of mystery, the mystic. Of course, mystery in the sense I have already described. There are myths which do not necessarily help us escape from mediocrity. For example, I remember having to watch a Batman movie whose title I have since forgotten. It was many years ago. In the opening part of the story, it is mentioned that the parents of the Batman are the ones who built the city's public transport. They were rich and just wanted to improve their life of their fellow citizens, which on the face of it is a noble act. Yet one is left to wonder, why are there such egregious inequalities in that city? Why can't the citizens build their own public transport? Do they lack the resources? Perhaps those resources are in the hands of a tiny minority of plutocrats, including the Batman's parents? There are so many questions which leave us thinking whether accepting the status quo of that city is indeed a lesson worth having, a lesson worth learning. Does the myth, in this case of the Batman's story, inspire us to overcome egocentrism? Or is it a form of indoctrination that holds us captive to a state of affairs that is reducible to egoism, recklessness, hubris? I am not criticizing the Batman story at large, as the expanded lore may address those concerns. And I don't know about the expanded lore anyway. So I am not making a blanket statement, a criticism about everything, just about this that I observed in the movie. The point is that we should not take myths at face value and should refrain from considering them useful in advance or necessarily. Myths are yet another tool that we have, a form of technology, as I explained. We need the right tool for the job, and sometimes that is not in the form of a myth. In practical terms, then, we must not blindly abandon the language or the media of communication more generally we use to do science, for example, or deal with legal affairs and everyday life. And instead of those, to force ourselves to engage in incessant mythologizing. We don't want that. We don't want to imply any of that. The key here and in this presentation in general is to keep an open mind. Continue searching for knowledge. Do not fall into the trap of absolute certainty, and try to learn who you are, who we are, in relation to all there is, in relation to the cosmos, to the logos that permeates everything. Find the balance. Seek and ultimately befriend wisdom, for that is what philosophy means, the friend of wisdom. So this is all I had to share with you, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. As I said, the text of this presentation, let me expand it over here and go to the beginning. The text of this presentation will be available on my website. If you are watching this on the video hosting platform, there will be a link to this text in the description. The link will be like this one, so protesilaos.com is my website, and then the rest of the link, you will find it there. And of course, you can find everything else that I do on my website. So that's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention. There will be more videos, though not necessarily on this theme. We will branch out to other topics as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye for now. Take care.